funny for Jeff to say that because if you work at home alone, the sort of only conversation, except is blogs. So I sort of read all of your blogs, and they seem incredibly active and prolific. And I sort of sit there, every 3 or 4 weeks I put something on my website, and so just seeing stuff every day is sort of the opposite sensation. But I wanted to read something, a piece that just went up yesterday, partly because I've never read before. I sort of think if I ever since high school, I guess, read it before, which is feels kind of strange because obviously writing's out there, but it's never spoken out loud. I guess you have to write a book in order to be asked to read otherwise. So sometimes, but yeah, a few sort of a bunch of words of preface of that. I've sort of begun partly because of blogs, and again partly because they sort of live in my imagination in this bigger way, because I sort of spend all day looking at them instead of actually writing. I've begun to realize that sort of my task is to sort of find things that aren't online and put them online, and sort of become the thing that drives me, the thing that sort of differentiates, the only point of differentiation in a lot of ways. The writing is a whole ball of wax, but that sort of process of discovery is the part that's become most challenging and even more and more intense, particularly given the sort of speed at which things go up. And again, it becomes part of the drive, particularly again given the sort of the way how active the blog conversation is. To see there's no greater thrill than sort of writing something and having one of you guys link to it. So, it becomes to begin to see some of these stories and ideas sort of live separate, sort of live in public is why I like doing what I do. So the other point and the other sort of point I wanted to make is about the subject, and it's obviously everyone stretches architecture in lots of different ways, and for me the sort of I write mainly about architecture, but the real subject is place and places, and even more than that, sort of the way that our sense of place is shifted by technology and by media. And that sort of becomes the kind of guiding principle of looking for stories and choosing stories and all of that, which is particularly relevant to the piece I want to read. And that piece is an essay that the Blum, which is the brand new magazine of the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto, invited me to write for the opening tonight of their new Daniel Libeskind building in Toronto. And I don't know if anyone seen pictures of it. It looks a lot like the other buildings. But it's the piece. Well, I wanted to read it partly to be a little bit provocative, knowing that most architects. I don't know how many of you are architects, but most architects have absolutely lost all patience with him. But I confess that I sort of love his mode of address, if not his buildings. That there's a sort of emotion to it that I find incredibly satisfying, and that surely comes from just my own sort of falling in love with architecture as a kid in New York City in a 1896 public school with all sorts of shapes and ladders and stuff like that, and that sort of process of discovery and of memory. So I hope sort of a love letter to Libeskind might piss you off a little bit, but also the other sort of thing, it is a bit more personal than a lot of the stuff that I get to write often is, and also because it was very much not a piece of criticism. I mean, they asked me to write the piece knowing that I would say something positive, and it's part of their opening weekend propaganda. But I wrote it for my wife's grandmother, in a sense, because she lives across the street from the building and hates it. So it became this challenge of trying to find a way. And everyone in Toronto hates it. And I think that once they see it, once they go inside of it, they like it more. But the piece was sort of a response to all of that, and trying to convince myself that I wasn't totally crazy. When I went to see the building in April and walked out and said, I'm absolutely terrified because I really like this. Clearly that's just a major shortcoming of my sort of future as an architecture critic. But anyway, so that's the sort of the long preface for the piece. Also that it's a sort of statement of optimism. That I read, I read everything that's, all of the magazines, all of the blog stuff, and I'm often sort of curious why people who do what some of us do bother if they seem to hate everything so much. So I sort of, this was very much a sort of response to that. So I hope all that sappiness is very good for my history and credibility. Anyway, it's called the Dream Life of Toronto. Places may seem like physical things, but they come to life only when viewed with meaning and memories. And that's what thrills me about the Michael Leaching Crystal of the ROM. More than just a museum of objects. It seems destined to become the leading repository of the dream life of Toronto. In 2001, not long before the ROM began its expansion project, I moved to Canada from New York for love and to study human geography at the University of Toronto. My academic focus was sense of place, which I soon found to be a very complicated thing. In the old formulation, a sense of place was most closely identified with traditional villages, where people share a history and build that history into the landscape with their homes and monuments. But my new city was proving itself to be a different kind of place altogether, seemingly bent on reinventing the idea of cosmopolitanism. As an American in Canada during those charged months after September 11th, I felt this personally, as I faced what it meant to be a global citizen of a changed world. And I watched as the city faced it physically, as this current crop of architecturally ambitious public buildings, helped along by the Ontario Superbuild Fund, brought that old question back to the fore about Toronto as a world city. With the release in the newspapers of each new set of architects' renderings, wild squiggles and flying tabletops, the questions became clearer and the arguments in the press and in the dog park more tense. What is Toronto's place in the world? What should the city become? And what does that have to do with architecture? I knew what I thought, bring it on, but I never felt that I could be very convincing. As a New Yorker in Toronto, praising all this bombastic architecture only made it sound like I wanted to make Toronto into New York. And in a way, I did. What I missed about New York was the sense that the city itself had a collective identity, a shared set of stories that tied together its disparate parts and its people, a melting pot. But Toronto defied cultural hegemony in both its people and its places. Often this was beautiful and more humane as people from everywhere could continue in meaningful ways to be from everywhere. In physical terms, that same quality defines Toronto what has become a cliche, the city of neighborhoods. Maybe I was acting like a competitive American, or so I was told, but I wanted monuments, places that tied together all the other places, if only to celebrate their differences. Exceptional places, ones that were better than all the rest, and exemplified the life of the city. At moments, the arrivals hall at Pearson International Airport, which compressed Toronto's global soul into a single location, came close. But airports make bad public spaces. They're too controlled, too corporate, too physically cut off from the rest of the city. Surely the CN Tower symbolizes Toronto, and it does seem fitting that the communications tower would stand for a city so connected to other places. But you can't occupy it except for riding to the top, and when you're in it, it disappears from view, which I suppose makes it a monument best admired from the comfort of your own neighborhood. And Nathan Phillips Square may be the city's living room, but for now it's a shabby one. Toronto is a far better city than that, but how would you prove it? Too often it seemed to me like a city of averages hiding its jewels. Where does this place go to dream? The exuberant plans to expand the ROM supplied an answer. More than an opera house, art school, stadium, or office building, a museum offers itself to everyone equally, particularly a museum of both culture and nature. A museum is a gift to the public life of the city. From architect Daniel Libeskind's very first rendering of a tilted glass trapezoid latched onto the historical ROM, it was clear this building was going to be special. I wasn't alone in wanting monuments, and it became even clearer over the years of construction as a staggering spiderweb of steel rose up from behind the hoardings on Bloor Street. Of course, there were also naysayers. I listened to functionalists tisk at all as waste, an insult to both the aesthetic and economy of the modernist victim that less is more. But it